Between the LG G3, the Samsung S95C, the Samsung QN90C, and the LG C3, which TV is the brightest of them all? Well, I'm going to tell you guys that answer in just a moment, but first I got to talk about how I set up these TVs. So the way I wanted to set these TVs up is to showcase their brightness, but not showcase them with vivid mode or standard mode. So instead I'm going to be using Cinema Home on the LGs, and I'm going to be using movie mode on the Samsungs. The Samsungs will have active tone mapping engaged, which will be very similar to dynamic tone mapping turned on for the LGs. Within Cinema Home, you do have dynamic tone mapping turned on, so that is going to be pretty equal there. Also, on the QN90C, I made sure to put it into standard local dimming so that we can get the most brightness capability out of the TV. Because if you go to high, it might crush some details a little bit more. I'm going to let you guys know ahead of time that this is going to be very favorable to the LG G3. And one of the reasons why I wanted to make this video, because I really don't think the LG G3 gets enough love within this category when you're talking about being able to push the TV in its more exotic modes without completely wrecking the image with something like vivid mode. The biggest thing that really stuck out when filming these TVs was that more often than not, the LG G3 was the brightest TV in the room when we were using these modes. And the second brightest TV usually changed between the S95C and the QN90C. I would say the S95C majority of the time could get brighter than the QN90C, but there were times where the QN90C did end up being the brightest in the room. And in dead last was the LG C3, and that's not really a surprise to me because it is a WOLED without any real enhancements. Now, I was honestly a little surprised by the results. I kind of expected the QN90C to be brighter more often than not than all of the OLEDs, but that just was not the case, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But the LG G3 really surprised me. More often than not, it was the brightest TV in the room when you're talking about these four TVs. But I do have to stress that this is really only going to be the case when you use settings like this. If you're going to use settings that keep the TV in their more accurate modes, well, they're all going to look fairly similar for the most part, unless you're using content that really pushes the TVs. However, when you do put the TV in modes like this, you will see the TVs separate a bit. And when that happens, in my opinion, LG is out Samsunging Samsung with the LG G3. Now remember, when we're talking about watching the TV like this, we're not talking about watching movies for the director's intent. It's not about that at all with these modes, because with these modes and going for the creator's intent, you're not really going to get that with these modes at all. In fact, it'll look more like you're on the set of the movie rather than watching the movie the way it was intended to be watched. But that'll definitely come down to personal preference. I know for me, when I'm watching a film, I definitely keep it in filmmaker mode or movie mode, but I also make sure that these enhancements like dynamic tone mapping are turned off because I don't want that image altered at all. However, there are some shows and there are some games where I'll totally go the other way and just go crazy with the settings and turn everything off. So it really is going to be depending on what I'm watching personally, and I'm sure that might be the case for a lot of you guys as well. I know I heard from some of you guys that you do like watching these brighter settings with something like a Pixar movie, and for that, I can definitely see that. And having seen a Pixar movie using these settings on the G3 compared to the S95C, yes, there's no doubt about it. For something like Pixar movies, it came alive and it was way brighter than the S95C. So I do really like to showcase these types of modes because they shouldn't be lost upon the TV reviews. Alright, so that's enough of the moving images. I really want to focus in and scrub through some footage and show you some still images with the G3 in mind where it really is going to show its strengths. So one of the demos I took a look at was this TCL demo here, and I paused it so that you can see kind of the differences in the overall screen brightness, and it was pretty clear to me that the G3 was punching above the other TVs quite significantly. So this was a demo that definitely showed off the G3's strengths in these modes. It was doing things that really made the image just leap off of the screen, and dare I say, it has a 3D pop to it. And I know that's kind of been a little bit of a joke within my live stream where I've kind of joked about 3D pop and how it is on certain TVs. I get what people are saying when they say 3D pop, so that's why it's really joked about. But when people are describing an image as it having 3D pop, I can see why they think that with the LG G3 when it is using dynamic tone mapping. And I gotta stress, it is really with dynamic tone mapping when you are in these brighter scenes. Because if you have a scene that's set more in the dark, you will be kind of changing the way that the image looks for the worse, in my opinion, because you are going to be raising certain elements of the image that really don't need to be raised. So in my opinion, once again, I do think it depends on the scene whether or not it's a good looking thing or not, because yeah, dynamic tone mapping can be a gift and a curse. Some people really love it on the LG TVs, and some people really don't like it on the LG TVs. So it really just depends on what you like. And same thing with the Samsung TVs. Some people really like active tone mapping and other people will just keep it on static. I can see it both ways. It really depends on what kind of person you are and how you like to watch your TV. And it might change depending on what you're watching. Really quickly, I just want to remind you guys that this is not a sponsored video and none of these TVs were sent to me by the manufacturers. I went out and got all these TVs to test and review myself, but if you guys do want to support the channel, one of the best ways that you could do that is by hitting the like button, or when you're ready to buy your TV, consider buying your next TV using one of my affiliate links in the description below. This is going to help us get more awesome TVs in for review and comparison. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. Now let's get on with the rest of the video. So here's another still image, and as we talk about the G3 and the S95C, I think these TVs are very comparable, but when you use them in a mode like this, I would say give me the G3 all day long over all of those TVs that we're showing you right now. Here you have a scene with the monkey in the snow. This is courtesy of Jennifer Gala. She has amazing demos. Go check out her channel. This is from HDR Super Channel. So I definitely wanted to give her a plug there. She's kind enough to let us use this footage for these demos. So thank you, Jennifer. So you can see the QN90C still does look brighter than all of the other TVs. And you will see scenes where this is definitely the case. You can also see that the second brightest TV is basically a tie between the S95C and the G3 for the second brightest. And then you can see that the C3 is definitely not the brightest. Now, just to give you an idea of what gaming could look like if they didn't do what they do in game mode, you do have this footage here. Now, this is a gameplay video. I'm not actually playing this game, but I wanted to show it to you in these modes so that you know, like, if you use ALLM, you still can get this type of image out of your game. There's only that workaround. If it works for you, that's great, right? And that's the thing that I have to mention, that it is only going to be on certain consoles and certain PC graphics cards that support ALLM. So you do have to remember that. But if you can use ALLM for that workaround, well, you got a really fantastic looking image. Remember, this is a video. We're still using the same settings to show you this gameplay. We're not actually in game mode on any of these TVs, but this is the kind of image that I hoped would be possible with game mode without having to use any workarounds. Like, this is what game mode should give me the option to look like, but unfortunately, it just doesn't. So that's why we have to be a little bit harsh on LG for their game mode. So this is a scene that is a moving scene, so it's kind of hard to get a still image on, but I want to point it out to you guys why you would want an OLED over an LCD TV for scenes like this. When you're talking about an LCD TV with full array local dimming or using mini LEDs, we are talking about having to control those dimming zones. And when we're talking about scene changes, you can see sometimes you're not always going to get the full brightness of elements within the image. So look at these lights, for example. Notice on every OLED how they look brighter than the LCD, the QN90C, right? That is one of the reasons why self-emissive pixels are going to be beneficial to scenes like this. And when you get a darker scene with bright lights, the QN90C and really a lot of local dimming based TVs can struggle with that. So you can't just rely on brightness measurements when it comes down to HDR impact and overall brightness of what you're seeing in person. And that is why I love doing these videos, because I can tell you what I see in person. The camera, it can only show so much, and it's not going to be able to capture everything. And at times, it's going to be more dramatic on camera than it is in person. But I can tell you for a fact that there was a lot of scenes where the G3 was dramatic in person, and it did look like the brighter TV in the room. And at times, it did look much brighter than the S95C. but most of the time they were very comparable. But when we're in more accurate modes like filmmaker mode, for example, then all these TVs will look fairly similar in most of the scenes. It's only going to be a few scenes where one will really separate. The G3 does separate at times, and so does the S95C. But they're so close that if you're watching in that type of mode, then that really won't matter. But I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments below. But if you want to see a comparison of the G3 and the S95C a little bit more close and to see what exactly is different about these two TVs, check out my video right here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.